Okay, we're learning a Maamar that's connected to Eicha. The Rebbe said on Shabbos Dvorim Chazoin, the 6th of Menachem Av, the year Tov Gimel 1976, the same year of the Sicha we learned this past Thursday, Friday. So the Maamar goes as follows. The pasuk says in the Eicha, Zechor Mah Hayah Lanu. Habita re'ez cherpasenu. So the literal translation, this is in Eicha Hey Aleph. God, remember, O Lord, what we had. Pay attention and see our shame. So it's a shame. We once had a glory, and now we're in shame. So this is a pasuk that's describing the shame the Jewish people are in now. So the Rebbe says, "Hine pasuk zash yesh negama pirsh lemad yosef." There's also positive, seemingly it's a negative statement. We're in a state of shame. So there's also the positive way to translate this verse. As the third Rebbe Chabad, the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek explains, Shemavar kama psukim in Megillas Eicha, that the Tzemach Tzedek in general took the approach in some of the verses of Eicha, kafi shehem l'mal yusa, to look at them in a positive note. Nifla, and in a wondrous way. Kafi shemevi, kvoiktish marachami admen b'divar maskal zeh, the Sefer Maamar Yiddish. There's also, the Friedrich Rebbe quotes evidently this idea of the Tzemach Tzedek in his own Maamar on the verse Zechor Mah Hayah Lanu, that was written in Yiddish. Why? So the Rebbe says in the brackets, Yiddish, That's something that everyone could learn. Yiddish then was like almost like English of today. So therefore, people who didn't understand necessarily the Lashon HaKodesh would still understand Yiddish. And this is the 20s. But it's easier to get it out physically to different locations because it's a universal language. And also the level of Yiddish was said and written in a way for more of a simple person to understand. What does the Friedrich Rebbe say? The Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, Shamar be'yishuv shel anoshim pshutim. Evidently, the Baal Shem Tov said this to simple folk. Shahoyse lahem misirs nefesh avur pidyon shvu mitzad Ahavas Yisrael. That these simple folk that the Torah said, that Baal Shem Tov said the Torah on this pasuk, Zechor Mah Hayah Lanu, that these were simple folk who had self-sacrifice when it came to situations of pidyon shvun, of freeing hostages, whether they were taken captive by local lords at those days. And the reason they did it was, of course, out of Ahavas Yisrael, which is an opposite of sinas chinam, of hating another Jew, which is why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The Baal Shem Tov said to them in the Torah, Zechor Mah Hayah Lanu. He said, the Baal Shem Tov says in Yiddish, Gedenkt Gott, remember God. Was is geworden durch Zeir Mah Neshama. What they were able to accomplish, so to say, with the Ma, the bittul of the Neshama, the self-nullification of the soul. Habita, see and acknowledge cherpasenu, their shame. Kuk, so the Baal Shem Tov says, what does this mean? Kuk, that God should look, focus. Kuk sich, zu wie sie seine mecharefes nafshem, to leave Ahavas Yisrael, how they're ready to shame their soul for the sake of love of another Jew, to go and rescue a person. So the Baal Shem Tov was using Zechor Shem Ma, remember the Ma of the Neshama, that they're ready to be macharif, their nefesh, for Ahavas Yisrael. The Rebbe says we have to understand, how can we understand this pirush? I mean, the Baal Shem Tov, the Jewish people are ready to go to shame themselves for the sake of another Jew, Ahavas Yisrael. So it's a ma'ila, it's a statement of praising the Jewish people. That through the bittul of the self-nullification, they're ready to go as far as to shame themselves, to do whatever it takes to help another Jew, which is a positive statement. The mal yusa, positive. Make it difficult for their soul. It's bitter for their soul. They're ready to go out and make things that are bitter, that just to go help another person. They're ready to go as far as Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice for sake of another person. Again, this is all positive. The Pirush HaPashut, to the simple translation, it's a cherpa, it's a statement of shame. But they're ready to make things difficult. Charif is sharp, and Mesiras Nefesh, just to help another person. That's a statement of positive to the simple translation, that's a statement of negative, that look at our cherpa, look at our shame. To understand this, you find various ideas that were said over by the Rebbe throughout the generations. We find traditionally the translation that one gives, the Rebbeim gave to this verse is from more closer to the literal translation, which is which is not so positive. There are various Maamar. Also from the Chassidic that the Baal would try to explain everything in its simple translation, in the hint, in the drasha, and in the soid, the secrets of Torah. And befrat with Sefer HaMaimarim Tov Reish Lamed, we also find in the book Sefer HaMaimarim Tov Reish Lamed, which was close to 100 years before this Maamar was said, a little more. Tov Reish Lamed would be 1870. Which was from the Admir Maharash, the fourth Rebbe Chabad, Rebbe Shmuel Shneerson. Sheish lechavivus miyuchedes, that there's special, the Rebbe saying was very dear to him, this Sefer Maamar Tov Reish Lamed. Why? Because Kivichinitfus al-Achreina, they put it into print in the years around 1973. Bahari Kol Davar Hu Bevadi Bashkach Pratis, the Rebbe says all by divine, that specifically around that time in 1973, when this Maamar that we're studying now was said, was when they put into print the Sefer Maimarim, the books of Maimarim, of the year Tov Reish Lamed of 1870 of the Rebbe Marash. Huva Maamar Zohar. So they're basically, what is it? What do all these places have? They bring the Zohar. In Exile, Bekoshes Knesset Yisrael, that this is a statement of quest from Knesset Yisrael on behalf of the Jewish people, that we say to God, Zechor Mah Hayah, that this is a quest that we have. Remember, God, what we had. And also, God asked the Jewish people, God says a statement to the Jewish people, remember. There's a verse that says, my people, Zechor Mah Hayah Balak Melech Moav Uma Anu Oisei Bilam B'Bar. Remember what Balak, the king of Moab, suggested, and what Bilham, the son of Beor, replied to him. And then God is reminding the Jewish people the miracles of the story, what happened with Balak and Bilam. Remember your creator, in the days of your youth. That its literal translation is to remember your creator in your youth, when you're young, when you're youthful. It's better to remember your creator then, because that's an appropriate time to do tshuva. You have the energy for tshuva. When a person's young, they have the strength to do tshuva. Don't do tshuva when you're old and tired. Yes, the Medrash says what does it mean the days of youth? It's talking about the Beis HaMikdash. Shnikar Beis HaBechira is talking about that's the house of choice, the God's house of choice. What is the statement saying? You should remember as Beis HaBechira, remember the house of our youth, when the temple was standing in its beauty. Maybe as the Tzemach Tzedek says, Mashakos of Aramaz, what the Moshe Zchut says. The idea of to remember. It's known we remember God's kindness and wonders that He did in the earlier days. We awaken within God. So the Zechor is that God should remember, and God is telling us to remember. But the idea that when we say remember to God means that when we awaken that memory of, remember when you made such miracles for us, that awakens that God should do those miracles again. Like the memory of the Exodus of Egypt. It's a commandment from God that we always have to remember. When we remember what happened, the miracles of leaving Egypt, that it has the same effect today, that the paroi that's today sitting on our oirif, on our neck, should be weakened because we remember that God is able to take us out of Egypt. If He took us once, and He'll take us out now again. This is what the Zohar is saying, that our people remember what Balak and Bilam had in mind, what Bilam responded. The idea is to awaken. We're trying to remind God, and God is reminding Himself. So He should awaken within Himself the same energy He had to save us at the time of Balak and Bilam from the curses to save us today. So too, the idea of Zechor Mah Hayah to remember the Beis HaMikdash in our youth. If you remember the Beis HaMikdash in its glory, it's to remind God and to remind both of us the situation of the glory of the temple. So therefore, we shouldn't come to a situation of destruction. And if there's a destruction, it should be rebuilt. This is what the Zohar says. And if we would always remember what God is telling us, remember the miracles, remember the Beis HaMikdash, don't lose focus on the temple that's standing. We wouldn't have to remind God of our shame of what we once had, because we would never be in a bad situation. Had we remembered then, we wouldn't need memory now. So the Rebbe says, aside from this, there's also the teaching of Hashem. So we have different varieties of the Zechor Mah Lanu. Zechor Mah Lanu, that is, like the Baal Shem Tov said, that the Mesiras Nefesh didn't have, is the Zechor Mah Lanu, remember the temple, and therefore when you see our Cherpa now, if we would remember the temple in our youth, then we wouldn't be in the situation that we have to remember that God has to look at our shame of today. Let's go back a second. But at the end of the day, is what we're saying now, according to most of these translations, is that the memory of that God has to remind ourselves, remember our situation of where we're now and our shame and what we had and our shame now. So therefore, to take us out of the situation, but the statement is presently is negative. The Rebbe says, when I was Sefer Mah Hayah, the Frierdiker brings this quote of the Baal Shem Tov, who Baal Shem Tov, he brings another idea of Baal Shem Tov. So the first statement he said to the simple Jews who had Mesiras Nefesh, Ahavas Yisrael, for Pidyon Shvum, for rescuing those who have been captive. Second, this one, the Baal Shem Tov said to Bnei Torah, that took pride in their studying of Torah and their chidushim of the things that they introduced in Torah. And there to the Bnei Torah, the Baal Shem says the opposite. What are we saying? Remember God, what we had. Gedenkt Gott, was ist geworden mit unser Mah Shem Neshama. Remember what happened to our Mah, not what we accomplished with our Mah. Remember what we did to our Mah. Look at our Shem. Make us see and be visual to us, unser eigene Schande, our shame. We should see Zechor Mah Hayah, remember what we had, and now look at our cherpa, what we've done with it. Meaning, as explained, just like this, the positive of Mah, meaning the vittel, Mah is self-nullification, which is positive. But the negative is when we say Zechor Mah Hayah, what did we do with that bittul? Did we take pride in our bittul? And that's shameful. There's also a bittul which is negative. Look at the ego that was built from our bittul. Like it's brought down, there was one of the Pelegish, one of the concubines of, I forget who it was, Esav, I think, one of Esav's children. It says her name was Re'u-Mah. What's Re'u-Mah? Re'u, look at my Mah, look at my bittul, look how high I achieved in my spirituality. I'm so nullified. Pay attention to that. So that's the contrary of nullified. That's the biggest ego. It's the contrary of nullification. That's a klipa in the world of Atzilus. Means you have nullification. We want people to acknowledge it. It's a very refined one because you've worked on yourself. But you take pride in your achievements, even spiritually. Look at my bittul. Look what I was able to accomplish. It means you feel your bittul. Your bittul gives you pride, even if you're saying it to yourself, never mind to someone else. You want to show us a bittul. Look at my bittul. And when you do Torah mitzvahs, you want others to realize that. So the Baal Shem Tov said that's shameful. Zechor Mah Hayah, look what you did with your Mah. You turned it into a source of pride. That's a cherpa. That's a shanda. That's something that shouldn't be. That's something that's a cherpa, shameful. And then it happens is then from that, once you start going on an ego trip, a self-serving trip, then you have the teachings of the Maggid and Zurich. The Rebbe is quoting everyone over here. The Rebbe so far quoted the Chassidic, the Rebbe Rash. Hashem Tov, Friedrich Rebbe, and the Maggid was rich. Shoshana Hishnas Mesamus Stakos, so 1973 was 200 years, means he passed away 1773. Pirush Maamar Text, this is what it's brought down. Ezu Shaita, what's the definition of a person who is a Shaita, a simpleton? To put it nicely, it's more than simple, it's just a person who's a Shaita, halachically, meaning a person that's so unreliable in their behavior, they're not even obligated to do Torah mitzvahs. It's a ma'avid ma'ashmaisim, you lose the ma. Shaita is like from the shtus, fool. What's the definition of a fool? The person who loses what you give them. So the little translation is if you give them. How do you know if a person's a fool? If they can't guard anything, you give them something to watch, they lose it. They're not trustworthy even for something simple to watch. The Maggid says that what do they lose? They lose their ma. Your whole identity is your bittul, is the ability for a human to become vital. Instead, you behave like an animal. You have no ma, you have no adam. Adam is also ma, right? Aleph Daled Mem makes adam. And Ma is Mem Hey, which is Adam is 45, and Mem Hey is 45. The definition of a person is the ability to have self-nullification. So what is the idea? What's the idea of a fool? A fool who loses this ability, who doesn't recognize it. They lose the Ma that they have. They lose what makes them unique as a human being versus an animal. What's the idea of a person? Is the fact that you are a human being. You have the form of a man. These are bizarre, as the Zohar teaches. The Zohar says that if an animal attacks a person, it's only because the animal sees you as another animal. If the animal saw you as a person, it wouldn't attack the person. When you lose your image of a man, because of your sins, the Rebbe asks, it's like a segula. What is a remedy to not be attacked from an animal is to have an image of a man. It's scientific, the Rebbe says. That's the science of nature. Then an animal will attack another animal, won't attack a human. If he attacks a human, it's because you look there like an animal. You look like animal feet. Is because you do sin, you've sinned. You lose your form of man. You look like an animal. Different animal will attack you. Rebbe tells the story of the Chaim is recently the Chaim HaKadosh. Same story is told about I think it's told about the Mogen Avram. The Mogen Av is sorry. The Rebbe from one of Tzemach Tzedek's children or grandchildren. That the Or Chaim was about to be attacked by a lion, and he showed his bris, the circumcision, and he showed that he had shmir bris. He never behaved in a way of sexual conduct that was inappropriate, whether masturbation or anything else. And when the lion saw that, he saw a person. He sees the person, he doesn't touch it. He protected the Or Chaim. Same thing, a bunch of wolves who were going to attack the Magen Avos. He showed his bris, and the wolves backed down. Why? Because the wolves won't attack a person who's a person. Attack a person who looks like an animal. And Therefore, scientifically, the animal could attack him. But Adam begematria Ma, and a person is the gematria of Ma. Again, Adam is Aleph Dal Mem, and Ma, which is 45, and Ma is 45. Mem is 40, Hey is 5. What does it mean? What's the definition of a fool? Who loses the Ma, loses what makes you unique as a person, as a human. Let's name it Selam Adam Gematria Ma. When you lose your Ma, which is what an Adam is, that was given to you from the higher world. Why you called a fool? You lost it because of your foolishness. Because what's an avera? Foolishness. Like it says, a person doesn't sin. Unless you have a foolish thought. Talks about the sota that if she has a foolish act, that there's a nasa period that causes a separation between a husband and a man, a husband and his wife. It's also referring to the Jewish people and God, that through doing acts of foolishness, it's like a person who's it's like a woman who cheats on her husband. The Rebbe says that's not who you really are. It's like a foolish idea possessed you, but that's not who you are. Not that you're not responsible for your acts, but that still doesn't define who you are. Let's do, I think, one more sif. and then we could, I think, tomorrow we'll do tomorrow morning an early class and finish this. So let's just finish Gimel. Saying that the God should pay attention and see our shame. It's like the shame of our being a widow. Today, the Jewish people in exile were like a widow. It says in the Eicha, when the Jewish people were like an orphan, like a widow. What's the idea? How does the thing start when a person becomes a widow in the higher levels and then trickles down to becoming more thick, more geshem? The Gemara teaches us, Almana, what's the word Almana? Hashem mana, from the word mana. Mana is 100, amount of money of 100. Shalmana ksuvas mana. What's the amount of halachically that a woman who is an a widow, and she remarries, so now she's married once, her ksuva that her new husband has to give her is only a mana, where a pesula gets masayim, gets 2 manas. Like a pesula sheksuvas masayim. The word almana, that's mana, but almana means she's less than a mana. She doesn't get a mana. She doesn't get the full 100. She's lacking the 100 gates. What's 100 gates? The two times 50 gates of understanding, which is bina. Bina is also connected. But in when Yitzchak planted and he did effort, he found 100 times, 100-fold, 100 gates, it says. Sha'arim also means evaluation, but also Sha'arim is gates. Why did he find 100? We only find that there's a concept of 15 gates of Bina. Nun Shari Bina, what's this 100? There's 50 gates. There's the 50 gates that are going from above down, and there's the 50 gates going from below up. The two sets of gates. 2 times 50 is 100. Shar makes 100 gates. It says Lamed Chaf is 50, Lamed is 30, and Chaf is 20. So the Hashem going from above down, Hashem Magdula. Then we say Kikol Bashamayim Varetz. Towards you, Hashem is greatness. So we're going towards Hashem Atmil Matal Maila. And they say Kikol Bashamayim Varetz. Everything in heaven and earth is also called as 50. The Chol Heim Oisis Sham. They're both equal numbers of Lamed Chaf, which makes up 50. That when we say that L'cha is from Matal, like I said, going towards Hashem. If you have the letters first, that says the Lamed first to the Chaf, then you're going the Hashem will do towards God, which is going from below down, from below up, and Kol. Also, but the Chaf first that means why? Because we always learned this many times that the alphabet, when the aleph base goes in order, it's from above down. That's why Pesach is tzaddikim, and Tishrei is Baal Tshuva because it's Tav Shin Reish. That's the letters going backwards. It's Teshuvah is Maamar Text. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll finish. I'm going to do an early class. I think I'm going to put out a note. We're going to do, because tomorrow we can't learn after Chatzos, and I'm after Chatzos at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to do a class at I think 12 o'clock tomorrow, which is by me 12 o'clock before the fast. And then whoever's not, it's too early for those who are not up could watch it.